We now rejoin Rick Dodson in his music chair, sitting in his shop, making armadillos by the truckload. Mr. Dodson, do you have anything to say to us at this time? He is nodding his head no while slinging sweat from his brow. He is working so hard and so fast and so furiously. The most we can hope for is to just get in here, plug this little socket up to the side of his head, and find out what it is he is thinking right now. Hey, hang on now. Here we go. We're going to plug it into his head right now. There. Got it in there. All right. It looks like he's thinking about his friend Bertha. He's nodding yes. He's thinking about Bertha. Our technicians are fine-tuning the machinery now. Soon, in a slightly changed voice than his own, you should be able to hear the direct thoughts about Bertha come through this very sensitive equipment, directly through your speakers and into your head.
Bertha, big bad Bertha.
Oh, Bertha, it's a sad story that I have to tell.
And it's your story, Bertha. Big bad Bertha. Oh, Bertha. Tell us your story, Bertha. Big bad Bertha was a bald-headed buck-toothed broad. A bald-headed buck-toothed broad who worked as both the belly dancer and the barroom bouncer at the Bare Busted bar in the Bronx. Oh, Bertha. Bertha gave birth. Bertha gave birth to baby Benny. Baby Benny, baby Benny, baby Benny. Oh, baby Benny. Bertha gave birth to baby Benny in the back seat of a big blue bus that was bound for Birmingham, being driven by Bertha's brother Barney Buford Brown. Yes, Barney was definitely backwards. And Barney, while driving this bus to Birmingham, bounced it into the back of a big black Buick, causing Barney, the bus driver's brains to bust and burst and bleed down his breast into his britches, and was deposited in his boots. Oh, Barney. Barney was never the same after that. And when Barney bashed the bus into the back of this big black Buick, causing his own brains to burst, baby Benny was thrown against the back seat of the bus with all of Bertha's weight behind baby Benny. And Bertha was a big girl. And it caused baby Benny's little face to get smashed, and his little nose to go flat, and a huge crevice right where the bar bounced off of his head to happen between the ear and the jawbone. Poor baby Benny. Benny's brains were changed after that. And he never looked the same. And Barney was no help at all. He just sat around sucking on a piece of wood and saying, we never knew what that meant. And baby Benny grew up. Baby Benny grew up to be Big Benny. They just called him Big Ben. And Big Ben, oh, he was a sight. Big Ben was so backwards. He never could drive a car. He rode his bicycle. Always rode his bicycle to work and back. He did get a job. He got blowing up balloons through a hole in the side of his head at the Barnum and Bailey Circus in the Freak Show. Now, baby Benny had left home and had been gone for several years, traveling around with the Barnum Bailey Circus, blowing up balloons through the hole in the side of his head. And when Benny had left, he had promised his mother, Mama, I promise you, Mama, that I will never smoke none of them cigarettes, none of them marijuana cigarettes. And Bertha was happy, Bertha was proud. And she let baby Benny go out into the world to seek his fortune as a balloon blower upper for the Barnum and Bailey Circus. And one day, baby Benny was miles from home in a strange place he had never been before. And baby Benny, when no one was looking, reached up in this crevice in the side of his head, which was quite deep, caused from bashing his poor little tiny head into the back of the rail of the seat in front of him when Barney bashed the bus into the back of the big black Buick. And with all of Bertha's weight, it created quite a crevice. And Benny took both fingers and pulled that crevice apart, and out popped a Marlboro. An oily, dirty, greasy Marlboro. Squeezed flat, crooked, and had some little hairs hanging off of it. He looked both ways, because even though he was a long way from home, he knew that if Bertha ever saw him smoking a Marlboro, she would pull his little head off and beat his butt raw. When he was sure that he was a long way from home and there was no chance that Bertha was anywhere, he lit up that cigarette, that oily, greasy, hairy cigarette, which he had kept for no telling how long in the crevice in the side of his head. He lit it up and he started riding his bicycle, and you got to understand that the way Billy was built now. Billy? Not Billy. Billy was his brother. You got to understand, though, the way he was built now. Benny, little Benny. He rode a bicycle different than most kids. I say kids, he was 30, but he still was a kid, and he rode that bicycle. He had to kind of lay on his belly, and he propped his chin up on the handlebars. And he took one arm and dropped it down and pedaled with it. And the other arm just kind of flopped along. And he lit up that cigarette and he was pedaling away in this fashion when a huge coal from the end of the cigarette, fiery hot, bounced out of the cigarette. The wind caught it and it went right straight in little Benny's right eye. Right in the center of his right eye. And little Benny had a little bitty opening to get into his right eye in the first place from the previous bus wreck. And that coal went right in the pupil of his eye and it burnt, and Benny's eyes started watering and he started going sideways on his bicycle and almost falling down, and he was rubbing that stuff out from his eyes and both eyes were watering. And he come to a stop and he set up on his bicycle, which was quite a sight to see, and it drawed quite a crowd. And as his eyes cleared enough for him to see through the crowd, he looked, and the first thing he saw, sitting there in a Hertz rent-a-car, was his mother, Bertha Brown. She got out of that car and she walked over to baby Benny, who she had not seen in 2 years, but who had promised faithfully that he would not smoke anything. She reared back and she slapped baby Benny right in the side of the head so hard that it opened up this crevice in the side of his head, and 5 more Marlboro fell out and hit the ground. Billy tried to fake her out. Benny tried to fake her out by immediately picking him up, grabbing a white Bic pen out of his pocket, breaking it in half, and chewing on it, acting like that was what it was all along. But Bertha, knowing better, picked up a board, a big board, and she started beating baby Billy, who was now 30. In front of these people, she was beating baby Billy from one side of the street to the other, and little Billy was hobbling. He kind of hobbled sideways, you know. Oh, it was a mess. And after that, baby Billy, he never ever carried Marlboros in his gash on his head anymore. Well, see, up until then, Bertha didn't even know he had a gash on it. She knew he had a gash on the head, but she didn't know that it was so deep. And I want you to know that he had never washed in there, ever. And and when Bertha learned about where he kept these Marlboros, and she finally looked in this head gash, which was about 7 inches long and about 3.5, 4 inches deep. It was like a navel opening, kind of. She found dirt and toys and stuff from years ago. And from then on out, she made baby Billy wash that crevice twice a day. With alcohol. I once seen something that was one of the strangest things I've ever seen in my life. I saw on this river, it was a pretty good sized river, and on this river, floating down it, was 5 guys. And they were floating on a marble slab. And I didn't see anything holding this marble slab up. It looked like it was just laying on top of the water. And it was floating. And it was slick and it was beautiful, and there were 5 guys floating down a river on this marble slab. And these weren't ordinary looking people. One of these guys, you could tell from the bank, he did not have any eyes. He did not have an eyeball in his head. I could see from the bank. The second guy was deaf and dumb. I could tell that by the way he sat. The third guy, he did not have any arms or legs. And he was just kind of propped up in a chair that they had rebuilt to accommodate his particular condition. The next guy, he was built normal, but he was stark naked. He didn't have any clothes on at all. And the next guy looked dead. He might have been asleep, but his color was off and he looked dead. And he was laying on the end of the slab, sort of minding his own business. I watched them from way upstream. I watched them soaring towards me, and I hid in the bushes so they wouldn't see me. On the other side of the bank, a rabbit stuck his head up. I saw him immediately, and so did they. The fellow that had no eyes seemed to notice him first. He nudged the fellow next to him, who was deaf and dumb, and he said, "Tell my brother over there that there's a rabbit I want him to go get for supper." The fellow that couldn't talk, he looked up and he said real loud to his brother, "Your brother wants you to go over there and get that rabbit." He'd said that to the fellow with no arms and legs. Now, this guy, sitting in this refashioned chair, he grinned real big and he just sort of fell off in the water. At first I thought about swimming out to him, saving him. But immediately I noticed that this fella, he started flopping and he was rolling in the water and he was heading towards the bank. And every time that his head would come roll up out of the water, he'd take a big old breath, and I saw he was smiling. And the other brothers were looking at him with a kind of a confident look that they knew he knew what he was doing. And just like a big old fishing cork, he rolled his way right over to the bank. He flopped up on the bank. He grabbed that rabbit with his teeth before that rabbit even knew what had him. And he plopped back out in the water and started rolling. And I wished you could have seen it, because it was one hell of a sight.
he had that rabbit by the ears in his teeth, and every time he'd roll over, he'd take a breath, and that rabbit would come out of the water and flop up in the air, standing straight out by its ears, and slap the water and go back into the water. It was the damnedest thing I've ever seen. The marble slab, and his buddies, they kind of helped him roll up on there and put him back in his orthopedic chair. And they handed this rabbit to their brother, who was the fellow who didn't have on any clothes. And this one brother kind of smiled and he said, "Put it in your pocket." Now, I got to tell you, from where I was sitting, I didn't see where that rabbit went, but this fella wasn't wearing any clothes, and he stuck it somewhere. And it was gone. And the dead guy just laid there. It was one of the strangest damn things I've ever seen. And then they just floated on out. Bye. I never knew really who they were or where they come from, or if they was going to eat that nasty rabbit after that. Some of those people from other places, you know, they do live their life a little differently than us. But even at that, these were still some pretty unusual looking people. Now, I seen a sculpture the other day I'd like to relay to you. I was over in the low-rent district part of town, and I was on a little street I've never been on before. I was driving down this street, and I looked over to the right side of the road, and there was a field, and in this field there were several sculptures. It was one of the strangest damn things I've ever seen in my life. It's really hard to describe what these sculptures look like, and I'm not even going to try on several of them. But there was this one that I just went directly to. I stopped my car, and this wasn't a very good part of town to be just getting out of your car and walking off and leaving it. But I did, because I saw this sculpture and it just made me want to walk up to it. Now, first of all, it was the smallest of the three or four that were there. It was still about 5 or 6 foot tall. And it didn't appear to be plugged into anything, but it looked electric. It kind of had that look of the day-glow paints from the 50s that all the kids painted their bicycles with. It was sort of fattish, and I'm not for sure what the material was that it was made out of. It looked like maybe it was wood that they painted to look like metal, and then that they painted again to look like wood. And it was, like I say, it was almost as wide as it was tall, and it had a hole right in the middle of it. And right in the middle of this hole, and the hole was pretty good size, and right in the middle of this hole, there was an arrow. And this arrow seemed to spin when the wind blew through it. I never really saw how the arrow was hooked up, but it spun real fast, and it made a high-pitched sound when it spun. kind of a... And the harder the wind blew, it got this thing to spinning even faster. And when it got to spinning at the fastest max, it would go dead silent. And it didn't look like an arrow anymore. It looked like a round black disc because it was traveling so fast. And this thing, it had a water tube on the side that was half full of water and had an orange ball floating in it. And there were some markings on the side of this tube that I had never seen anything quite like. I think it had something to do with the level of the water. Some of this sculpture was glass, I'm sure. The big eye was glass anyway. And I think that the legs, it had legs that looked kind of like horses' legs. That was the only thing that looked like a horse about it, was the legs. But it had these kind of horses' legs, and they were a little shorter than a horse, but they were horses' legs, you could tell. The Shetland pony, I think, maybe, legs. And hanging down right between these four legs of the Shetland pony was some big old cow udders, and they were painted bright orange, day-glow orange. And right on the end of the nipples, they were painted black. And right on the tip of that, they had a bright, iridescent green point. And drawn on the side of the udders, all the way down, all the way around, were 2 or 3 little snakes, those kind of snakes that have the red and white and black stripes on them. And they were very small. The little udders weren't more than 2 or 3 inches long. And so the snakes were only an inch or so long, but because they were so brightly colored, you could tell right away that they were little snakes on the side of this thing's udder. And way up in the air at the very top, it had this big flat, it was a kind of a flat thing. It was thick and flat and kind of rustic looking. And there was a fake pigeon sitting on the top of it. And that was just one of the strangest things about the sculpture, is the fake pigeon looked fake. It was plastic. The sun shined through it. You could see it was plastic. It was hollow. It was cheap. It looked like somebody had given $1 for it 20 years ago. And it had pigeon shit on it. So obviously the pigeons knew that it was fake. And about every hour or two, I'm not sure what caused this to happen, but about every hour or two, this whole thing would just start making noise, like metal banging against each other, or creaking, or chains hitting, or something. It was a settling sound, the sound that an old house makes right before it starts to fall apart. But it never did fall apart. It just kind of makes sounds all over. And it would kind of wiggle and move and act like it was going to fall apart, and then it would stop. And each time it took on a slightly different look than it had the time before. But it wasn't falling apart or rotting. It was like it was mutating, but it's so hard to describe because of course, it was an inanimate object. I'm sitting here really trying to grope my mind, to rack my mind, to remember, because there were so many angles and so many sides to this thing. There was one spot you could get inside it. It wasn't a very big spot, but you could crawl up inside it. And there were all kind of weird markings and insignias and things I've never seen before in any book. written on the walls inside this thing. Had a little place to sit down, a little smaller than a person, like a kid would be real comfortable in there. A person had to duck. But you could get up in there. And there was a spot you could see out. But from the outside, you couldn't see in. I don't know what that was. You couldn't see out well. Things looked wavy and smoky and kind of dark, but you could see out. It was one of the strangest damn things I've ever seen. Bye, Hubert. I enjoyed making a tape for you, buddy. I'll see you later.
And remember, Hubert, if I was you, I would not play this tape for the Tabernacle Choir. I don't think I would play this tape to a bar full of ex-FBI agents. Please, Hubert, do not send a copy of this tape to my grandmother. Hi, Hubert.
The green grass. A stink bug. A piece of trash. It fits snug. A worm in the ground. But please don't eat it. Plead as you will, but I still will not feed it to you. But a worm wouldn't crunch, 'cause it has no bones. It has no tongue, so it would make no tones. And it might be neat to see a worm squirm. But I'm still not going to feed you that nasty old worm. You know, when you think about it, eating a worm might be okay. They're high in protein, and I once heard someone say that a big fat worm that was lightly sautéed in red wine might be fine. And of course, you could cook them on a little rotation device, or you could serve them cold like shrimp on ice. Hey, a barbecued worm might be nice, or you could just eat them raw, or like a popsicle, a frozen worm on a stick. Chocolate-covered worms might do the trick. Or you could dice them, or spice them, or serve them up real thick with a heavy syrup on top. Or you could boil them or fry them. Poached worms, that's it. Sushi worms, that might be a hit. Or you could blanch them or mash them. My God, there's no end. You could make worm herb tea and serve it to all of your friends. You could serve them with dressing like you would on turkey. Or you could smoke them and dry them and eat them like beef jerky. You know, what might be really great is a great big worm stew. My God, there's no end. I think we found the perfect food, so be cool and eat up, dudes. It's time to turn this tape over and listen to the other side. And there is another side. There's always another side.